Picture this: 3rd century Rome. You're a young noblewoman, secure in your family's wealth, status, and deep connections to the imperial court. You assume your position is unassailable. Then, a messenger arrives at your villa, bearing an imperial summons sealed by the Empress herself, Julia Soamias Bassiana. You anticipate an invitation to a lavish feast or a prestigious cultural event. Instead, you are about to be coerced into participating in the most depraved spectacle the Roman Empire had ever sanctioned: public sexual competitions where aristocratic women were forced to perform for the entertainment of the imperial court. And yes, this horrific reality is historically documented. The evidence is clear, recorded by contemporary historians who witnessed these events firsthand. What I'm about to detail will fundamentally challenge everything you thought you knew about Roman decadence. Our primary sources for this dark chapter are Cassius Dio's Roman History, Herodian's History of the Empire, and the controversial, though contemporary, Historia Augusta. These aren't just rumors or mere palace gossip. These are records compiled by official court historians documenting imperial activities for posterity. Furthermore, archaeological evidence from the Palatine Hill excavations has uncovered spaces that align with descriptions of these private amphitheatres, complete with subterranean chambers and specialized seating arrangements that could only have served one purpose. We are discussing a systematic exploitation that affected hundreds of noble families across the empire, operational for nearly 3 years, and one that fundamentally altered Roman aristocratic society. The scale of this operation was truly unprecedented. If you think this story couldn't get more twisted, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. The rabbit hole of imperial depravity is far deeper than you can possibly imagine. How did this nightmare actually function? Julia Soamias, mother of the teenage emperor Elagabalus, didn't simply wake up one day and decide to humiliate Rome's elite women. This was a calculated system of control, meticulously planned and bureaucratically organized. It began with the summons. These were not polite requests. They were imperial commands. The message was invariably the same. You are cordially invited to participate in the Empress's cultural symposium on feminine virtue and devotion. Imagine arriving at the palace, anticipating a philosophical discussion. Instead, you're escorted to a private amphitheatre where other confused noblewomen are already gathering. Julia Soamias then appears, flanked by Praetorian guards, and announces the true purpose of the gathering: competitive displays of devotion to imperial pleasure. This is where the system becomes systematically horrifying. This wasn't chaos. There were schedules. Written records were meticulously kept of participants' performances. Rankings were maintained. Winners received imperial favor and financial rewards. Losers faced social exile or worse. The competitions themselves, which I cannot describe in detail due to policy restrictions, were acts of unimaginable degradation. These women, the daughters of senators and the wives of generals, were compelled to compete in acts that would have been shocking even in Rome's most notorious brothels. But it got worse. Julia Soamias wasn't content with private humiliation. She began inviting foreign dignitaries, rival court officials, and eventually started charging admission to wealthy Romans who wished to witness the spectacle. One specific, historian-recorded case involved Claudia Severa, wife of a prominent senator. When she initially refused to participate, Julia had her husband's political appointments revoked and their family's vital grain imports blocked. Faced with financial ruin, Claudia was forced to comply. Julia's control mechanisms went far beyond mere economic pressure. She began using the events to gather blackmail material. Secret observers recorded which noblewomen participated willingly, which resisted, and what each was willing to do to protect her family's status. The Empress essentially created a comprehensive database of Roman aristocratic women's sexual activities and moral compromises. This information quickly became the currency of imperial politics. By $220 CE, Julia Soamias had exported this system to other major Roman cities: Alexandria, Antioch, and Carthage all established their own cultural symposiums under local imperial representatives. The process of normalization was gradual but deliberate. First, participation was presented as a patriotic duty. Then it became a requirement for maintaining court access. Finally, it was simply the expected behavior for any woman seeking to advance her family's political position. An entire generation of Roman aristocratic women grew up knowing that their social standing depended on their willingness to participate in these degrading competitions. The psychological impact was devastating. Contemporary writers like Dio noted a marked increase in suicides among noble families, mysterious illnesses affecting court women, and a general atmosphere of pervasive fear that permeated Roman high society. How did Julia Soamias maintain this system of institutionalized sexual exploitation? The answer lies in understanding how perfectly she leveraged existing Roman power structures. Enforcement. The Praetorian Guard was not just protecting the emperor, they were actively monitoring noble families for compliance. Refusal to participate was not merely social suicide, it was literally treason against the imperial family. The carrot and stick economics. Families who participated received tax breaks, preferential trade agreements, and priority consideration for government positions. Those who didn't faced economic warfare. What about opposition? Surely some powerful Romans tried to stop this madness. They did, and Julia had specific methods for dealing with them. Senator Marcus Aurelius Severus attempted to organize a formal complaint to the emperor. He disappeared during a routine trip to his country estate. His body was never found, but his political allies certainly got the message. For those she couldn't eliminate, Julia deployed her collected blackmail material. The system became self-perpetuating. Victims became enforcers, using their knowledge of others' shame to maintain their own precarious positions within the imperial court. But Julia Soamias made one fatal miscalculation. She assumed her son, Emperor Elagabalus, would always support her activities. Yet, even he began to realize that his mother's system was destroying the empire's social fabric. The breaking point came in 222 CE, when Julia decided to expand the competitions to include foreign noblewomen from allied kingdoms. This was no longer just internal Roman politics, it was international humiliation. King Artaxerxes of Armenia withdrew his daughter from a planned marriage alliance after learning what would be expected of her at court. Similar rejections came from Parthia, Germania, and other allied regions. Rome's military alliances began crumbling as allied leaders refused to risk their women's honor for political agreements. The empire was literally being torn apart by sexual politics. The end came swiftly and violently. In March 222 CE, a faction of Praetorian guards, senators, and even some of Julia's former victims coordinated a palace coup. Both Julia Soamias and Emperor Elagabalus were assassinated in a single day. Looking at this historical nightmare, it is impossible not to see patterns that still exist today. The systematic sexual exploitation of women by those in power, the use of shame and blackmail to maintain political control, and the normalization of abuse through bureaucratic processes. The psychological mechanisms Julia Soamias employed: isolation, economic pressure, social ostracism, and the creation of competing victim hierarchies are still the tools used by predators in positions of power. We need to remember the hundreds of Roman noblewomen whose names we don't even know, who suffered in silence, who took their own lives rather than comply, and who were forgotten by history, while their abuser was recorded merely as an empress. So I want to ask you, what other historical abuses of power do you think have been sanitized or ignored by traditional histories? What patterns do you recognize from this story in modern contexts? Drop your thoughts in the comments, but let's keep this discussion respectful to the victims we've discussed today. This has been another deep dive into the darkest corners of history here on the Hollow Throne. If you found this investigation valuable, that subscribe button and notification bell help us continue exposing the stories traditional historians won't tell. Until next time, remember, power corrupts, But absolute power creates monsters.